Hi, it's you. So, last video I talked about horizontal strokes. Today I will talk about vertical strokes. So, vertical strokes are written straight downwards. They are largely the same as horizontal stroke. You start with a small preparation movement, but near the end, it becomes a bit more complicated. There are a few things you can do. The first thing is to close the stroke back up like you did with the horizontal stroke. So the term is a bit hard to translate, but I will call it a hanging stroke. The idea is that there's something dangling on the end of the stroke. So the second kind of stroke, you follow the same movement, you stop, and then you pull downwards to create a sort of pointed end. So we can call this a pointed stroke. So again, I want to reinforce the idea that this is not just one movement. You make a small movement at the start, you go almost all the way down, and then you pull out. So here's how they look like when written with pencil. Again, these small movements are very subtle, but you notice that there is a difference between these two strokes. On the left, there is a small thing at the end to stop the stroke, and on the right, it continues downwards like a pointed tip. And note that only the tip should be pointed, not the rest of the stroke. The question now might be, when do you use these strokes? So the hanging stroke has a small movement upwards at the end, whereas the pointed stroke has a small movement downwards. When the vertical stroke is not the last stroke of a character, it tends to be hanging, and when it is the last, it tends to be pointed. This is not a hard and fast rule, there are some exceptions, but it's a good guideline. When you're writing a character with vertical and horizontal strokes, the horizontal strokes provide movement, but the vertical strokes provide a sense of grounding, a sense of stability. So most of them are vertically down. There are some exceptions, I will cover them later. So when you're writing a character with both vertical and horizontal strokes, I want you to watch the spacing both internal and external. So in the case of the character for 10, all your spacing is external. So note that the vertical stroke is split roughly evenly into two parts. But the horizontal stroke is actually longer on the right. It's not important that it is exactly the same length left and right, but it is important that they are balanced. Some calligraphers have the horizontal stroke longer on the left, I write it longer on the right. It's important to be consistent, whichever you pick. In a character like the one for King, all your spaces are internal. Again, watch the relationship between the horizontals, as per the last video, but also note that the vertical is still split into two equal parts, and that the horizontal stroke is balanced around the main vertical, even though it's a bit longer on the right. The spacing is a lot tighter than the one for 10, because it is an internal spacing. In this character that I've written above, meaning stem, there is an internal space on top of the intersection and an external space below. So you realize the external space is significantly longer. It can be a 1/3 to 2/3 relationship, roughly. For a character like the one for Earth, also I wrote that above. Right, the spacing, there is external spacing on top of the intersection and an internal spacing below. So again, the proportions are roughly 2/3 to 1/3, not exact. So it's important to think of these kind of spacing when you're writing Chinese characters.